Welcome back to today's story. Brace yourselves, because this episode contains a plot twist so brutal it could tear both families apart. What would you do if you discovered that the mother of the woman you love died taking a knife meant for your own father, a secret wooden box, yellowed photos from 30 years ago, and a DNA result that left James paralyzed with shock? The truth about the accident 10 years ago has been stripped bare. There was no car accident. There was only a love-struck woman sacrificing her life to save an ex-lover, the man who betrayed her. And that man was James's father. The moment James tried to tell Diep the truth, his father smashed the phone and screamed like a madman. "If she finds out, she'll kill me, and she will leave you immediately." Between duty to his father and his love, between a cruel truth and a peaceful lie, what will James choose? Can this ill-fated romance survive the sentence of the past? Watch now to uncover the darkest secret of the Huan family. Do you think James should hide it or reveal the truth? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe right now so you don't miss the next breathtaking turn of this tragedy. Now let's get started. James sat there in the most spacious and luxurious office of the corporation, where power is measured by silence and nods of agreement. In front of him, the computer screen glowed bright, displaying dense Excel spreadsheets, green and red growth charts interwoven, and a slew of HR plans for the new year. Those were numbers that spoke. Numbers that decided the fate of thousands of people under his command. But in this very moment, those numbers suddenly became meaningless. They blurred. They blurred as if a fog from somewhere in his memory had rushed in blanketing reality. The expensive fountain pen in James's hand hovered in midair. The ink hadn't even dried on the page, but his train of thought had drifted far away. Far from this room. Far from the reality of a powerful CEO. He was drifting back to an old memory, a tiny fragment, but sharp as a shard of broken glass. It was a meeting with John, a close friend who held more of his family's secrets than anyone else. Whether it was raining or sunny that day, James couldn't quite remember. He only remembered the chill running down his spine when John accidentally let slip a single sentence, a sentence that seemed harmless, yet acted like a key throwing opened the door to his family's darkest dungeon. What did John say? John said, "Your dad." He once said Diep looks exactly like her mother. James blinked. He tried to return to the financial report in front of him, but he couldn't. That sentence kept ringing, repeating over and over like a static-filled tape in his head. Like her mother. Sounds normal, doesn't it? A polite remark, a casual comparison. But no. For James, it was a bolt of lightning from a clear blue sky. Because his father, Mr. Huan, was not a man of details. He wasn't the type to notice whose eyes a girl had or whose smile she inherited. He was a man of numbers, a prophet of cold calculations. And yet, he remembered Diep's mother's face. He didn't just remember, he compared. He recognized that calm aura, the way Diep looked down in thought, that heartbreakingly gentle demeanor. It was a carbon copy of the woman who had passed away. Why? That question began to scream in James's mind. Why did his father know Diep's mother so well? Her mother died in that accident 10 years ago, an accident his father was indirectly involved in through a blood debt. But Was that really the first time they met? Or had there been a connection between Mr. Juan and Diep's mother long before that? A secret connection that neither James nor Diep knew anything about. Suspicion was like a drop of black ink falling into a glass of clear water. It spread, slowly, steadily, but unstoppably. It blackened all of James's thoughts. He began to shudder as he considered a more terrifying possibility that Diep's appearance in his life, or her family's tragedy, was not a coincidence. James set the pen down on the desk. A dry click echoed in the silent room. He recalled the times he had looked at Diep recently. Ever since hearing John say that the way he looked at his lover had changed. It was no longer just love or admiration. It was mixed with scrutiny. Every time Diep sat reading by the window, every time she tucked her hair behind her ear, or every time she smiled gently to hide her sadness, James found himself searching. He was searching for the shadow of another woman on her face, the woman his father had known, the woman whose death had become a sentence hanging over their love. He recalled the old days when he asked John more about it. John had just shaken his head. "That's all I know. The old man blurted it out once when he was drunk, and then he strictly forbade anyone from ever mentioning it again. Forbidden." Why was it forbidden? If she was just an old acquaintance, why did she become a taboo subject? Secrets. This family was built on secrets. The mortar plastered onto the Huan dynasty's wall of fame wasn't concrete and steel, it was silence and lies. James felt suffocated. He loosened the tie around his neck. It felt like an invisible hand was tightening around his throat. Does Diep know? James wondered. Does she know her mother knew my father? Or is she like me, just a pawn on the chessboard of fate, arranged by the previous generation? These questions didn't attack him in a sudden crashing wave. No, they were more dangerous than that. They were like termites, silently gnawing at the foundation of the house until everything rots from the inside out, while the exterior still looks perfectly intact. James looked at the computer screen. HR figures, bonuses, plans for the new year. It all suddenly seemed so laughable. He was trying to run a corporation, trying to bring fairness to his employees, trying to be a good boss. But in his own life, he couldn't find the truth. He was lost in the labyrinth of his own family. James, a gentle voice rang out from behind, snapping James back to reality. He started his shoulders trembling slightly. It was Mom. She walked into the room like a soft breeze, soundless, but carrying warmth. She placed a steaming cup of coffee on his desk. The aroma of premium Arabica spread through the air, blending with the cold draft of the air conditioner, creating a fragile sense of comfort. "Don't overwork yourself, son," she said, her voice warm but hiding deep worry. "You've only just returned. Your body needs time to readjust." James looked up at his mother. He smiled the smile of a good son, but his eyes couldn't hide the exhaustion. "Thanks, Mom. I'm fine." He lied, and his mother knew it. She stood there, her hand resting lightly on the back of his chair. She looked at the piles of files on the desk. New recruitment, TET bonus plans, end-of-year financial reports. She knew the burden on James's shoulders wasn't just financial. Let me tell you about James right now. He isn't just an heir returning to take over the legacy. He is a man trying to glue broken pieces back together. Recruiting new staff for James isn't just about finding people who can do the job. He scrutinized every resume with extreme precision. He was searching for honesty. He was terrified of two-faced people. He was terrified of repeating his father's mistakes, trusting sycophants only to be stabbed in the back. And the Tet bonus plan. James had stayed up for 3 nights straight to balance it. He wanted absolute fairness. He didn't want anyone from the old security guard to the newest hire to feel abandoned or shortchanged. Why? Because James understood what it felt like to be abandoned. He understood the feeling of giving your whole heart only to receive coldness in return. He was trying to compensate the world for exactly what he lacked: recognition and compassion. His mother observed it all. She watched the way he turned each page, the way he frowned and thought, the way he sighed when he thought no one was listening. An infinite sorrow rose in her heart. Was she proud? Of course. Her son had grown up, become a responsible man who cared for others. But she was also afraid. She feared that James's overly sensitive heart would be crushed by this ruthless business machine. And above all, she feared the ghosts of the past lurking in this house would never let him go. James's mother gently stroked her son's hair. Then her gaze drifted toward the slightly ajar office door. Out in that hallway, at the end of the house, was Mr. Hohn's room, James's father. In this massive house, there was a terrifying silence that had never been filled. It was the distance between James and his father. You see, after that fateful night, when the secret of the accident was exposed, Mr. Hohn had apologized. He had bowed his head. He had cried. But is an apology a magic eraser that can wipe away every wound? No. Between those two men, an invisible wall still stood. It was cold. It was thick. They lived under one roof, but like strangers. They crossed paths at meals, exchanged a few words about the company, about the weather. But they never truly sat down and looked into each other's eyes. Everything just stopped there, suspended, unfinished, like a wound that is scabbed over on the surface, but is still festering underneath. James's mother was the one caught in the middle. She was in pain seeing her husband's silence, a remorse so late it had become mute. And she saw James's hesitation. She knew her son wasn't one to hold a grudge. James wasn't stubborn. He wasn't trying to punish his father. He just didn't know where to start. How could he hug the man who indirectly caused the death of his girlfriend's parents? How could he laugh and talk normally when every time he looked at his father, he remembered the pain in Diep's eyes? James was trapped between family and love, between the past and the present, between the duty of a son and the pain of a man. And his mother, she understood that some wounds cannot be healed by medicine. They need time, and they need the whole truth. James lifted the coffee cup, the steam rising against his face. He looked at his mother, then out the window once more. The question about Diep's mother resurfaced. Dad said Diep looks exactly like her. Perhaps the key to breaking the ice between father and son, the key to freeing James from this torment, lay within that very secret. James set the coffee down. His gaze shifted. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp determination. He had to know the truth, even if that truth might shatter the fragile peace remaining in these final days of the year. He glanced at the numbers on the screen one last time, then shut down the computer. The monitor went black, leaving a deep abyss reflecting his own face. James stood up. He wouldn't hide anymore. He was going to find answers, and perhaps the first person he needed to confront wasn't Diep, but the man sitting at the end of that hallway. The office door opened. James stepped out. The hallway was long, dark, and tunnel-like. His footsteps echoed beat by beat, like the ticking of a countdown clock of destiny. James was walking down the path to the truth, but he didn't realize that there are Pandora's boxes that once open can never be closed again. What is his father hiding about Diep's mother? Will this secret save or destroy this already fragile father-son relationship? The answer remained in the shadows, but now James stood before his father's door. His hand rested on the doorknob. James drove Diep and little Nee home. Outside, the sky began to pour the dreary drizzle characteristic of the year's end, draping the city in a gray, melancholy veil. Inside the car, the atmosphere seemed divided into two separate worlds. In the back seat, little Nee's crisp laughter rang out as she tried on a new shirt, blending with Diep's gentle, loving voice. It was the sound of happiness of the small family James had always dreamed of. But in the driver's seat, James was submerged in a completely different reality. He gripped the steering wheel tight, his knuckles turning white. The rhythmic swish, swish of the wipers on the windshield sounded like his own skipping heartbeat. John's comments about the resemblance between Diep and her mother clung to him relentlessly. Why did his father remember the aura of a woman who died 10 years ago so clearly? Why would a cold man like Mr. Hoan, who only cared about business, describe a woman with such emotional words? Calm, quiet, measured. That isn't how he talks about business partners. That isn't how he talks about debtors. That is how people talk about someone they once cared for deeply. Perhaps even someone they once loved. A crazy thought flashed through James's mind, nearly making him slam on the brakes. Could it be that the relationship between his father and Diep's family didn't just start with that cursed debt? Could it be that the debt was just an excuse, the tip of the iceberg, while beneath lay a love story far more complex and painful? If this theory was true, then the accident all those years ago wasn't just a random tragedy caused by gangsters. It could have been an act of revenge, or worse, a retribution of fate for his father's past mistakes. "Brother James, what's wrong?" Nee's clear voice snapped James back to reality. He looked in the rearview mirror, seeing the little girl's big round eyes looking at him with worry. Beside her, Diep was watching him too, her eyes filled with silent concern. "I'm fine." James tried to force a smile, but it was so stiff, even he felt it was fake. Just a lot of year-end work. Diep didn't ask further. That was her way. She always knew when to stop. She reached out and squeezed his shoulder gently, a touch full of understanding. But Diep's absolute trust only made James feel guiltier. He was hiding a terrible suspicion from her. A suspicion that, if true, could tear their relationship apart forever. After dropping Diep and her daughter at their gate, James didn't stay for dinner as usual. He used the excuse of needing to return to the company to handle an urgent contract. Diep looked at him, a flicker of sadness in her eyes, but she nodded. As James's car rolled away, he looked in the rearview mirror, watching her small figure and the little girl standing under the eaves fading into the rain. His heart clenched. He promised himself, "I will find the truth. No matter how cruel it is, I have to know to protect you." James didn't go to the company. He drove straight to his parents' villa. The house was silent. His mother had gone to the pagoda for year-end prayers with her old friends. The maids were busy cleaning in the back kitchen. And his father, his private car wasn't in the garage. Perhaps he had gone to therapy or to play chess with his retired friends, a new habit he was trying to form, to forget the trauma of the company's collapse, the only chance. James walked into the house. His footsteps echoed on the cold marble floor. He walked straight to the second floor, heading toward the end of the hall. There was a room he had felt apprehensive about entering since childhood, his father's private study. The heavy mahogany door was slightly ajar. James pushed it gently. Creak! The dry hinges groaned like a weak cry for help in the quiet space. The room was steeped in the smell of old paper-damp wood and stale tobacco, his father's signature scent. Everything remained exactly as it was when he was still the chairman. The massive desk, the colossal bookshelves lining the walls, and the expensive feng shui paintings. James walked over to the desk. He didn't know what he was looking for. A diary, a letter, or a file. He was only acting on instinct. He pulled open drawer after drawer. Just old business documents, expired contracts, dried up pens. Nothing suspicious. James sighed, leaning back in the chair. Maybe he was being too paranoid. Maybe John was wrong. Maybe his father simply had a good memory for faces. But then, James's eyes stopped at something unusual. On the bookshelf behind the chair, where thick encyclopedias that no one ever touched were kept, there was a small gap. One book seemed out of place, not aligned with the rest. For a perfectionist and meticulous man like his father, leaving a book askew was impossible. Unless, behind that book, lay something he frequently took out to look at, then hurriedly put back. James's heart began to pound. He stood up, approaching the bookshelf. His trembling hand touched the spine of the thick book. He pulled it out, and, just as he predicted, behind the camouflage of dry knowledge was a small, worn wooden box, the varnish peeling at the corners. James took the box out and placed it on the desk. His hands were ice cold. He felt like he was violating his father's most sacred sanctuary. But curiosity conquered fear. The box wasn't locked. James took a deep breath and opened the lid. Inside, there was no gold or silver, nor secret Swiss bank account numbers. Only a few trinkets. A handkerchief embroidered with a lotus flower, now yellowed with age. An old Zippo lighter engraved with strange initials. And a stack of black and white photos, carefully tied with a red rubber band. James picked up the photos. The first one made him frown. It was his father, in his youth, only about 25 or 26 years old. He stood in front of the University of Economics gate, a radiant, ambitious smile on his face, a smile James had never seen on his father in the last 30 years. But what froze James in place wasn't his father. It was the person standing next to him. In the photo, His father had his arm around a young girl. She wore a simple white aodai, her hair flowing to her shoulders, her face elegant and gentle, but her eyes held a tinge of sadness. James dropped the photo onto the desk. There was no mistaking it. Even though the photo was old, even though decades had passed those features, those eyes, that nose, the shy way she smiled, it was Diep. No, that wasn't Diep. Diep was only in her early 20s. This photo was taken in the 90s. The person in the photo was Diep's mother. James felt the world spin. He hurriedly flipped through the rest of the photos. The second one, his father and that woman sitting by a lake, gazing at each other with eyes that held a whole universe of love. The third one, a handwritten letter in his father's neat script. James tremblingly read the words written on the back of the photo. To Lon, the only woman I will ever love in this life. Even if fate forces me to marry another for the sake of the family, my heart belongs to you forever. Lon. Diep's mother's name was Lon. James gripped the edge of the desk to keep from collapsing. The horrifying truth was laid bare before him. His father and Diep's mother. They weren't just acquaintances. They weren't creditor and debtor. They were each other's first love. An unforgettable love that was torn apart. So then, why did his father later become Mrs. Land's creditor? Why did he let gangsters cause an accident for the woman he once swore he loved more than life itself? What was the hidden story here? Or had that old love turned into hatred when Mrs. Land married someone else? James turned to the last item at the bottom of the box. It was a yellow DNA test paper dated 24 years ago. 24 years ago. That was the year Diep was born. James held his breath. His eyes scanned the dry technical terms to find the final conclusion at the bottom of the page. Result of biological relationship test. No biological relationship. James exhaled sharply, cold sweat soaking him. Thank God. He had almost thought of the worst-case scenario, that he and Diep were half-siblings. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. This paper proved his father had once suspected Diep was his child, and he had secretly tested it. The result was negative, but if Diep wasn't his child, and he still kept these keepsakes, it proved he never forgot Mrs. Lon. So why was he so cruel? Why did he indirectly push her to her death? Click! The sound of the front door opening downstairs. Heavy footsteps entered. James started. His father was home. He clumsily stuffed the photos and the test paper back into the wooden box. His trembling hands made it impossible to close the lid properly right away. The footsteps were coming up the stairs. Slow, steady, clomp, clomp, clomp. James looked around. No place to hide. He was in his father's office. If he walked in and saw James rummaging through his love tokens, everything would blow up. James hurriedly shoved the box back behind the book on the shelf. He tried to align the book perfectly. Who's there? Mr. Hwan's hoarse voice rang out right in the hallway, just a few steps from the door. James's heart stopped. Thinking fast, he grabbed an old financial file from the desk, pretending to stand there reading it. The office door burst open. Mr. Hwan stood there clutching his cane, his aged face a mix of surprise and suspicion upon seeing his son in the room. "Ye James, what are you doing here? At this hour I thought you were at the company." James turned around, trying to keep his face as calm as possible, even though his heart was pounding like it wanted to jump out of his chest. I came back to find the file for the Southern Urban Project from last year. I remembered you kept a hard copy here. Mr. Juan narrowed his eyes at his son. His gaze swept from James's sweat-beaded forehead down to the file in his hand and then stopped at the bookshelf behind James's back. Did he notice the book was off by a millimeter? Could he smell the fear radiating from James? The air in the room grew thick. Two men looked at each other. One hiding a secret born of curiosity. The other hiding an entire painful past. That file? Mr. Juan spoke slowly, taking steps into the room, his eyes never leaving James. I destroyed it last month. Don't you remember? James froze. He had told a terrible lie. Mr. Juan moved closer. He stood opposite James, the distance between them just a hand's breadth. He looked straight into his son's eyes, his gaze as sharp as it was in his prime. Tell the truth, James. What are you looking for? Then Mr. Juan's eyes shifted over James's shoulder, staring straight at the encyclopedia on the shelf. James knew he was busted. The book hadn't been pushed in flush. A corner of the old wooden box was still peeking out. Mr. Juan reached out, intending to grab the book. James, on reflex, reached out to block him. Dad, don't. In that moment, time seemed to stop. The hands of the father and the son met in midair. It wasn't a handshake of reconciliation, but a blockage of secrets about to be exposed. Mr. Juan looked at James, his eyes suddenly turning red and welling up with tears. His voice trembled, no longer interrogating, but weak and pleading. You saw it, didn't you? James nodded silently. Mr. Juan dropped his hand, swaying as if he were about to collapse. He stumbled back, slumping into the old leather armchair. He buried his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking violently. That is the greatest sin of my life. James, do you know why Diep's mother died? James held his breath, waiting. The answer he had been searching for was about to be spoken. Mr. Juan looked up, tears streaming down his wrinkles. It wasn't an accident, son. She died because of me. She took a knife meant for me from those gangsters. The car accident was just a staged scene to blind the police. What? James stumbled back, his back hitting the bookshelf. Books crashed to the floor. Diep's mother died in his father's place. Mrs. Lon sacrificed her life to save the man who abandoned her. And his father had kept this sky-shattering secret for 10 years, letting Diep live as an orphan filled with hatred for phantom killers. If Diep finds out this truth, that her mother didn't die from bad luck, but because she took a bullet for her lover's father, how could she survive this? Oh my God. James gasped, his voice breaking. Dad, what have you done? Right at that moment, the phone in James's pocket rang. It was Diep. The ringtone echoed in the silent room like a siren. The screen lit up with the words, "My beloved wife," and Diep's radiant smile. James looked at the phone, then at the father collapsing before him. Should he answer? If he does, what will he tell her? Hello, honey. I just found out my dad is the direct cause of your mother's gruesome death. Or will he continue to lie? Continue to cover it up, just like his father did for 10 years. The phone kept ringing. Ring after ring, urgent, painful. James's hand hovered, his finger suspended between the green answer button and the red decline button. One choice leads to a brutal truth. One choice leads to eternal lies. And just as his finger was about to touch the screen, Mr. Juan suddenly lunged forward, snatched the phone from James's hand and hurled it violently against the wall. Crash. The phone shattered into pieces. The screen went black. "You cannot tell her!" Mr. Juan screamed, his eyes bulging like a madman. "You cannot let that girl know. If she knows, she will kill me and she will leave you immediately. Do you want to lose her, James? Do you want to lose everything?" James stood frozen in the room, surrounded by scattered books and broken phone parts. He looked at his father in panic. For the first time in his life, James realized the monster isn't out there in the underworld. It is living right inside this house, in the cowardice and selfishness of the people called family. And the real storm is only just beginning.